Now, you mentioned you have to invest in new systems to do it. But, I mean, this is a time when banks are under pressure to raise capital, profits are meagre. So how are you finding the money?
Focus. Stick to what you do well, and there is no room now for projects, for extracurricular activities. It is focused on what you're good at. Our business is a scale business. It's a business where your client penetration is directly correlated with your relevancy in the marketplace. If you are not in the top 5, generally speaking, in our business, you are struggling because you cannot make the economics work. So it's about building scale. It's about focusing on what you're good at. It is about enabling a certain amount of innovation and allowing that to take place, but you cannot do that in a way that detracts from your core business. And I think banks, if I'm a little critical here, self-critical, had the luxury over the past 10 or 15 years to enter a lot of different business lines that looked like good opportunities where there was money to be made. That game is over, right? You now have to really be very focused on your customers. You have to know what you're good at. You have to show that you can add value. And if you can do that, there are still returns to be made, and you can justify the investment required to substantiate that. But the other point we're kind of bouncing around the table on is nobody now has all the intellectual property or capital to do this alone.
Yeah.
This is a collaborative game.
Right, okay, so tell us a bit more about that. Yeah, we're going to come on to that.
So I mean, exactly right.
It's
and this is the whole point
almost.
of sitting down with FIs in particular is, you are a competitor, a collaborator, and a customer, all at the same time. And so having mature conversations about that, exploring the areas of collaboration, exploring the areas of competition, being very explicit about where it makes sense to leverage each other because you have unique strengths which the other party doesn't have, is the essence of these partnership conversations that are now taking place. Some are a little bit more loosely defined, some are very, very deep end-to-end integrations.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is
So the fact
different.
that we've got Mike sitting here, I presume you think you look at PayPal as more of a partner than a threat.
I think we're all three. I think we're a customer, we're a collaborator, and clearly we're a competitor. Yeah. And that's normal.
And I think that's healthy too. I mean, that's the nature of the financial services sector. There is a healthy, competitive, cooperative relationship between banks already. Many banks are directly competing and also partnering. People like PayPal are entering the market with different types of services. We're driving incremental revenue and volume and activity to you and your customers. We're also, at the same time, potentially viewed as a competitor. And we're also directly customers of yourselves. By processing, we have to process them through banks. So there's like a pull-push relationship here, and I think it's very healthy to have to hear you say that there's opportunities for partnership here, and we can definitely explore those kinds of ideas, and that's something we're very actively doing.
I mean, it sounds very straightforward, but I imagine it's rather complicated because. I mean, if you think about it, well, we sit down and agree, well, where we're going to compete, where we're going to partner, but you've only got to have a slightly, aggressive term with someone where you're competing, and then we turn around and say, well, I don't want to partner with them anymore.
And this is
what I'm saying is a delicate, fragile.
It's very delicate. It's very delicate, and it requires as I said, a maturity to have conversations about where you are taking your business, what your direction of travel is, what your strategic aspiration is, because these things require investment. And nobody's going to invest in a partnership unless there is some assurance around the return that you will get from that. And it comes back to my very opening comment about lack of visibility into this kind of discontinuous change landscape that we have makes strategic planning very, very difficult. It's not, it's very challenging for a lot of FIs now to know what business you will be in 3-5 years' time. So when you're sitting down with a potential partner to collaborate, that's an ambiguity you have to navigate.
Right. But I mean, the thrust of most of the regulation, or well, some of the regulation has been definitely with SEPA, it's about bringing down prices, isn't it? Okay. And then the challenge for the banks or whoever else is involved is still to make margins on that and still to have the resources to invest. So that must be something that you pick up when you're talking to.
Yeah, I think certainly if I go back a few years, I think the do nothing option was quite a prevalent one in financial services because there was no real need. But I think if you look now, that luxury is gone, and I think even though it's tough and people maybe don't have as much money as they did, I think the sensible organisations now are saying, how do I look at my core business, exactly as you mentioned before, Mike. How do I look at that core business and make sure that in the future I'm able to change, collaborate, innovate, that whole cycle in a way that's going to chop and change. And I can't predict now what that's going to be. So I need to have something that is much more flexible and integrated. I don't mean connected, I mean integrated. And that means I understand the business process and how I can change that business process for what's coming up. That's a modern generation of systems that most banks now don't have. So I think this do-nothing option is certainly one now that the clever and the more forward-thinking banks, I think, are starting to engage that conversation with us to say, it may not be 1 year or 2 years or 3 years down the line, but if I want to survive 15 years, I've got to think now about how that whole infrastructure fits together and how flexible it is for me to be able to make those business changes that I'm going to need to do. I always have a slight smile. I think in 10 to 15 years' time, there will be case studies at MIT and Harvard on those banks that have done this and those that haven't, like we all did at university on other industries. So I think that's coming. Yeah. And it's an important thing to think of. We don't know what change is coming, and we need to make sure we have that flexibility, and it's got to be done at the process level. We can't just connect systems together like we have done in lots of the industry in the past. If we don't have the core underlying process defined, and when we know what it is, it's going to be very difficult to change that quickly and efficiently and change our business models, which is what we're going to need to do going forward. I think we can be a lot better than we are now, and I think we need to be able to have we need to be able to master the process, not let the process master us. And I think that's where we are at the moment. We use this excuse in many of the banks, I think, of, we've got all the dresses and all the colours and all the sizes, and it's very difficult to change. And I think that's true. Banks have, it's a misnomer really, they don't have old technology, they have old technology, medium sort of age technology, new technology, and cutting edge technology.
Every kind of technology.
So, how do you make sure that you pick the right battles, if you like, in this sort of area? So I think for me, it's a case of saying, look, it may not be now the fact that we want to build something very specific for us.
What Lawrence is highlighting, though, is the strategic importance of getting your technology strategy right for these businesses has gone up, x-fold, and there's such a premium now on getting that right, because the cycles are quite long, and if you get it wrong today, it'll take you a long time to change and to catch up. So a real premium on getting that right.
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So does that mean that banks are a little bit nervous about being the first mover, and they're more inclined to sort of sit around and see what everybody else is doing, so they make sure you get on the right bus, not the wrong bus?
I think there's some of that, but I think it's more predicated on where you are in a point of time, and particularly your legacy and your history. Obviously, there are banks that have come together as a result of strategic mergers and acquisitions, and others that have grown more organically. You will end up with a very different technology and architecture and enabling operational model behind that. So I think it's more about where you are in the journey, what you've inherited by virtue of your organizational legacy, and also your business strategy. So how do you want to embed technology, not as an enabler, but actually as a fundamental core part of how your business thinks and operates? And that's a bit of a step change, because technology used to be thought of as just an enabler, right? We use technology to deliver a business outcome. That's changed. It's now actually
technology is
right
the
at the
business.
forefront. Yeah, it's hand in glove with that conversation.
Absolutely right. I mean, if you look at other industries, what we do in technology and banking is the operations of most other industries. And banks have never really thought about technology, I think, in that way. You know, it's the oil rig, it's the manufacturing line. That's how important IT is in financial services. And if you don't get that core operational end-to-end piece correct, you could end up being non-compliant or very bad on your cost-income ratio, or actually, you know, losing your banking license. So it's actually fundamental IT to the industry.
I'd agree. I'd say that's a very good point. I mean, we're built on technology, but an important point here is it's got to be completely get out of the way of the customer experience. You've got to have that technology to be able to drive it, the customer experience, but then you want the technology to get out of the way so you end up with a nice, easy user experience, and you can really start to add value. We have very big ambitions, and it's an ongoing process. It never stops. You've got to continue that investment cycle and the change program internally all the time. It's not oh good, we've built it, now we can leave it there for 5 years. That's not going to stack up in the modern world. It's an ever changing scene.
And Brian, I'd add, whilst technology is critical as well, there's the whole process point, which is, you know, in our institution we've adopted lean quite universally, and in my area, you know, also the front office, not just the sort of middle and back office functions, as an example of the kind of, you know, real drains up operational re-engineering that you need to go through to strip out redundant processes, to make things faster, simpler, fewer touch points, reduce your operational risks. You need a platform of technology on which that resides and operates clearly. But I think that the industry is going through this kind of quite structural change. Again, all driven around how do we get a better client experience. Yes, you want to become more efficient, but you fundamentally want to drive a differentiated or a better client experience.
And I think we're definitely seeing that, you know, if you look at the relationship between customers, be they corporate or retail customers, in the past they've had to transact on other people's terms. So they've had to go to a bank, or they've had to go to the internet site, or they've had to call a call center. Now, you really don't need that relationship. So when you are interacting, that has to be as efficient as possible, has to be as effective as possible, and it has to have the least number of touch points for a customer to get what he wants out of that. And that's very difficult to do when you have manual processes that actually impact on that drawing from the customer. You know, I think if we're looking at what they want out of this, they want a simple transaction, and they want it when they want it, how they want it, you know, in the way that they want it. So it's a completely different interaction now, especially with social media, etc., into how they want to do those transactions. So you need to have something that enables that. So it's all about the customer experience, all about what the customer wants, but at the back of it, you need to be efficient, and you can't afford to have those disconnected elements and processes, as you mentioned.
And I think that's authentication is a good example of this. There's a very strong appetite for strong authentication, but strong authentication is pushing the problem into the customer's face. Yeah. It's not taking ownership of the fact that we need to know this customer, know their behavior, manage the risk ourselves. I think there's a different, makes it much harder to provide a really good user experience if you push people through, get your device out, oh, I haven't got the device with me, you've got to use this, got to have these passwords. It's a horrible user experience. It's very secure, it's great.
But it's difficult, Neil, isn't it, to get that sort of authentication right in the middle, isn't it? I mean, you either have it too lax and the system's insecure, or you have it's too tight and then people can't use it. Yeah.
Yes, but it should be customer driven, right? Yeah. So this is a fundamental obligation on you know the service providers in this industry to educate and to let the customers know and understand the different choices and the options and the risks and the benefits. So if I want a very simple, easy 1 or 2 or 3 click experience without lots of devices cluttering up my experience, that is available to you, right? However, it comes with the following attendant risks and potential issues. So it may be fit for purpose for certain interactions, certain types of transactions, but it may not be fit for purpose for others. And I think that's the level of transparency and education that's really incumbent upon the industry now to bring to that bring to the table. And I'm referring specifically to the larger corporate space. Obviously, the retail space is somewhat different.
Okay, and things like in the transaction banking space. I mean, how much are we now seeing a new generation of professionals who want different things? I mean, we've tended to associate things like social media with the retail space, but how much is that? So, I mean, does a corporate want to access their account through Facebook?
Not at this point.
Okay.
I've not heard that. That's not to say it may not or will not happen, because I think there's a, the Treasury and Finance departments within large companies may not be as exposed to the ways that their company is using and leveraging social media, for example. But there's going to quickly become a point at which that is more relevant to the way they are running their business, and that will then in turn affect their relationship with their banks and their service providers. We're not seeing it yet in the corporate space.